So what are the key takeaways from this lesson? Well, there's a couple things. First, supply chain coordination. The whole idea of having the different players in the supply chain coordinate to improve the overall profitability. And the main culprit that we find that stops this supply chain coordination is what's known as the bullwhip effect. And so the bullwhip effect is essentially when the demand or order variability increases as we move upstream from the end customer to the original supplier. And so if you have a bullwhip effect or have this miscoordination, it results in increased costs, lost efficiencies, lower profits for the supply chain as a whole. Now, we dove in deeply in the causes of the bullwhip effect and some ways of measuring it, quantifying it, but it really boils down to three big buckets of what causes the bullwhip effect. The first is misalignment of incentives and behavior. Remember, a supply chain is this strange thing where I have all these different companies, different partners, where they're worried about the overall supply chain profitability, but they're also more concerned about the profitability of their own companies. So there's a natural tension here. What's good for me individually might not be good for the supply chain as a whole. And so there's a lot of give and take, and this is where the interesting tension comes in, and that's why this is such an interesting field. One of the other main causes is the poor demand forecasting. If my only way that I forecast, if I'm this player, is on what I see ahead of me from my downstream customer, then I'm going to have problems, because that is, if their forecast is based on the previous one and all the way down, there's an amplification of any variability. So the whole idea of poor demand forecasting that is more myopic and only looking at the orders of my downstream immediate customer, that can cause some problems too, and is a major cause of the bullwhip effect. Also, order batching and timing. We saw just a simple example. If I go from daily orders to weekly orders, what effect that had. It dramatically increases the variability. So different ways that I have batching or the timing with those advanced buys where I'm doing a lot of forward buying, those cause a lot of the problems associated with the bullwhip effect. We also talked about a bunch of methods or strategies to have better coordination to reduce or counteract this bullwhip effect. So for forecasting, it's very important that you consider the end consumer, not just your immediate supply chain partner's orders. So looking at the end consumer demand, which is the real demand the supply chain as a whole faces, is critical. There's a lot of operational things you can do. Shorten your lead time, shorten your review time, reduce the cost of placing an order, whether that's through better transportation options, more efficient ordering policies, electronic data interchange, all these different things which effectively lower the cost of an order, therefore lower the lot size, which means I can have more frequent delivery. Behavior. There's a lot of behavioral things you can do because, again, you've got these conflicting incentives. You can shift sales to be focused on what they sell through a customer, not just sell to. You can try to adjust the behavior of promotions because, as we can see, promotions drive a lot of volume through, but it's unclear in all cases if it's worth the effort because, as we know, when I put a big batch of product going through the pipeline, it has impacts. And so we should always evaluate the promotion effectiveness. Now, these last two bear a little more discussion. The first one is combining stages. So what do I mean here? This is where one of the players in the supply chain takes over or manages the inventory of the next player. So this typically happens in retail, where a manufacturer will take over the replenishment and the inventory management of a category of product. And so this might be where a manufacturer of frozen pizzas takes over the whole space in the retail store for ordering that, and they determine when to order, how much to order, and they get paid when the retailer sells it through. Now, there are many flavors to this. VMI has been around, vendor managed inventory has been around for decades, and it's adjusted. Every company does it a little differently. Another place you see it is in hospitals. So hospitals are really good at taking care of sick people. They're not so good at managing inventory. So what happens a lot of times is they'll have a provider manage the inventory that goes into the hospitals. And so this is another relationship where someone's expertise for managing the product is better used than the hospital trying to manage that inventory. So you see this very frequently in different flavors of this. Same thing with the CRP or the continuous replenishment programs. It's the same idea. You're combining two stages and one of the players is managing the inventory. The last one is all about information sharing. And so not just giving the end demand information, but also the plans, the promotions, kind of more foresight. And this is what's known as collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment. And CPFR has been around for about 20 years now. And it really is a pioneering effort that was brought about by Walmart and a company called Warner Lambert, which makes Listerine. And so you can think of it, or the way I like to think about it, is sales and operations planning for two companies, because it really comes down to sharing information. And so both Walmart and Warner Lambert shared both their production plans or their sales plans for the next 6 months, met weekly, try to bring those together to understand the differences, and essentially worked out a better way of providing the product. Now what this included, or what this ended up being, is they'd have a 6-week ahead delivery plan. Warner Lambert would no longer need to plan and buffer because they did for uncertainties, not knowing what Walmart was going to do. And Walmart, on the other hand, didn't have to have extra order or extra inventory coming, not knowing when Warner Lambert was going to be able to supply. So after this initial pilot, which was done in the mid-1990s, the item fill rate for this product for Walmart went from about an 85% to 98%. The inventory dropped by 25% that the retailer Walmart had to hold. Also, the sales also increased. So Warner Lambert was happy, Walmart was happy, and what it really showed is that when two entities come together and plan and share their plans and their incentives, that it reduces the overall cost and improves the efficiency. Again, to me, it's similar to sales and operations planning for two companies. Anyway, we talked a lot about the supply chain coordination and their different approaches. I would encourage you to look up vendor managed inventory, continuous replenishment programs, CPFR, collaborative planning, forecasting, replenishment, if you want to find out more practical implementations. Just like S&OP, though, that we talked about in the last lesson, these are really change management things. And so the math and the models are not that complicated. The challenge is getting people to behave. So all the lessons we talked about with sales and operations planning, they apply here as well. So that's all I wanted to cover. And so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please use the discussion forum. And I hope you enjoyed the lecture.